There's been a lot of praise for the game plan that Dave Canales put together on Sunday and the way that Bryce Young executed it. But where's the praise for Dan Morgan as the Panthers sit at 7-6 and right there in the NFC South title race? I'll answer that question among other listener questions on this weekly Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, the part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Back here once again on a Wednesday, and I know last Wednesday we didn't have a mailbag. Listen, it was a short week. It was also a holiday week. So after Monday night, we went back over what happened on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, it's like, let's not do this. Let's not go do the whole mailbag deal again and discuss Dave Canales as a play caller and Bryce Young as the hopeful franchise quarterback. I didn't have the energy for it. As you heard, as I went on a little mini rant at the beginning of a show last week, but I feel better now. You know why I feel better? Because Dave Canales had an excellent game plan on Sunday. Bryce Young looked awesome. There was finally balance offensively. And what do you know? 1 week you're happy, 1 week you're mad. This week you're on the scale of, all right, maybe Dave actually can do the job. Maybe Bryce can actually be the guy. And thank God there's no game on Sunday, so we don't have to swing right back to the other side of the pendulum. We can wait until a couple of weeks when they play against New Orleans to find out where we all stand as far as Dave Canales and Bryce Young. But we are back with another weekly Wednesday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers. At me, DM me over on Twitter or over on Blue Sky to get your questions into me for next week's edition of the show. But before we get into the mailbag, I had a lot of people ask me about Adam Thielen and whether he would be coming back to Carolina after the news came out on Monday that Thielen would be released by the Vikings. Now, he asked to be released because, well, what do you know? The Vikings, after a couple of weeks, once they had Jordan Addison back and they had other players were healthy, they didn't need Adam Thielen. And he had his role reduced, which from the very beginning, it was obvious that Adam Thielen was not going to be a part of the game plan past week 4 or week 5. Either way, the Vikings said, we don't care. Let's bring the hometown kid back to Minnesota. And his family and Adam, they were all excited to go back to play for the Vikings. And I get that. It made sense. And for Carolina, it made sense because they had Tetairoa McMillan. They had Xavier Legette. They had Jalen Coker, who, yes, had a quad injury the next day. They didn't know that was going to happen, of course. They had Hunter Renfrow, who they could bring back as well. They felt good about what they had in-house to where they didn't need the old wily vet and Adam Thielen, who had been the top target for Bryce Young in his first 2 years as a starter in Carolina. So they sent Adam back to Minnesota and got a really nice return, a return that I was pretty happy about considering I didn't really love the idea of moving on from Adam Thielen that early. I wanted to see Tetairoa McMillan and Jalen Coker and Xavier Legette all demonstrate prior to the trade deadline that they were ready to be the guys, and T-Mac has done that from day one. XL hasn't really had a ton of highlight moments. He's been better of late, and then Jalen Coker, he started to come on, especially as we saw on Sunday with that touchdown and then that game-winning catch there late in the fourth quarter. I just wanted to see the Panthers be a little bit more patient with the young receivers instead of betting on them. We have seen at times the passing offense has not been great. Has that been Dave? Has that been Bryce? Has been the receivers? Probably all of the above. But Adam Thielen went to Minnesota, didn't play, And now he will not be a Carolina Panther as he was subject to waivers. New rule change after the trade deadline. All veterans have to be subject to waivers. Veterans and even players that are not vested veterans all have to go to waivers and they can be claimed. I don't know where the Panthers sat on the waiver wire claim. I tried Googling it and every single thing that came up was about fantasy football waiver advice, which I don't need nor want. So I don't know where they were on the waiver wire claim. Dave Canales was asked about Adam Thielen on Monday, and he said he's a player on another team. And we'll wait to see what happens as far as will he clear waivers. And had that been the case, maybe there would have been a conversation about Adam coming back to Carolina. Instead, he's going to be teaming up with Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh as he's going to be a Steeler for the final possibly 5 weeks of his NFL career as he's going to retire after this season. I didn't think Carolina needed him. We've seen what T-Mac's done. They have XL playing in a starring role. Same thing with Jalen Coker, the way he played on Sunday especially. Got to feel good about that. Jimmy Horn Jr., he's been out there as a gadget guy. Bryson Tremaine has been their special teams ace as David Moore has been out with that elbow injury on IR for the last 2 months. And then Hunter Renfrow hasn't been active since week 6. I don't know where Adam would have fit into what they're doing at receiver right now. So there was no need, in my opinion, to bring him back. And whether Carolina placed a waiver claim or not, he's not here in Carolina. And we all can now move on to the weekly Wednesday mailbag. And we'll start off with the biggest Panthers fan in Australia. I don't have his name, but he asked me this, or at least said this. While all the love for Bryce, Dave, and the team is 100% justified after the win, I couldn't help but see Dan Morgan's fingerprints all over that win. T-Mac and Coker making huge plays. Fitzgerald making all his kicks, Mike Jack, pick 6, Lathan Ransom flying around on defense, and the O-line continues to maul. How much confidence should we as fans have moving forward in this front office to keep building? I think you should have a lot of confidence because you look at it, and like I want to go over those guys individually, but you look at just the trade that Dan made late August of 2024 heading into that season. He went out there and traded for Mike Jackson. And just the string of events that led to Mike Jackson getting to Carolina is something I want to go back over. Let's recall that Dan Morgan back in March 2024 traded Dante Jackson, a player he was going to cut, traded him for Deontay Johnson, a much-needed starting wide receiver, someone Panthers thought could be the number 1 receiver and could be that guy for Bryce Young. They swapped their 6th-round pick with Pittsburgh for their 7th-round pick. They ended up using that 7th-round pick on Michael Barrett from Michigan, who wasn't going to make the team here. And they saw that they needed help at corner because Dane Jackson got injured. They traded Michael Barrett for Mike Jackson to come over here from Seattle. And Mike Jackson, only went out there and played and started in every single game last year. Damn near played every snap, led the team in pass deflections, and was awesome. So they trade away Dante Jackson, try to get a starting caliber wide receiver who could be their number 1, and ended up with Mike Jackson, who's been a really good player for them, I think, considering, hell, he came in late in August. I don't know what your expectations can be for a player who gets traded to your team that late during training camp for the preseason. And then for him to be good enough to where they gave him a new deal, for him to come back and start, even though plenty of people were clamoring for another corner to come to Carolina throughout the offseason for whatever reason, even though they told you back on the first day of the legal negotiating period, JC and Mike Jack are guys. What a great play he made on Sunday. And that was huge for the Panthers in winning that game. But it wasn't just Mike Jack, as you mentioned, biggest fan in Australia, biggest Panthers fan in Australia. T-Mac, he's been great. The fact that the Panthers sat there at 8th overall, stuck to their board, and took him, tip of the cap, as you see right here on YouTube, Jalen Coker, to identify him, and then even Ryan Fitzgerald the last 2 years as undrafted free agents, to identify those guys, develop them, and have them stick around and be able to perform. That's great. Obviously, Lathan Ransom, another player that they identified in the 4th round who had to come in and start on Sunday because of the suspension of Teron Merrick and other injuries that are there in the secondary. I like the job that Dan Morgan is doing. And I went over this back in, I believe, either February or January earlier this year, just grading his first year as a GM. And maybe I'll do that again once that time of the year circles around in 2026. I don't want it to come anytime soon. I want to enjoy the final 4 weeks of the regular season, hopefully more time of Panther football and not get back to the doldrums of the offseason, which I dread every year. But he's done a good job, especially for somebody who was a hallway promotion. It just felt convenient, but also how many general manager candidates were trying to come to Carolina and work for David Tepper, and same thing of how many head coaches wanted to take this job, and the fact that Dan and Dave both had shared an office space, at least across the hall from each other in Seattle, and had that relationship, and there's continuity, alignment within the front office and the entire coaching staff right now. The Panthers feel like they're in a healthy place. Now, they could, of course, go out there and lose to the Saints and not make the playoffs this year, but they are obviously headed in the right direction, and this rookie class has done a good job. Talk more about that here over the next couple of days as we're going to kind of look at the offense and defense at this bye week and how they've done, kind of give up some grades so far this season. But yeah, man, I really like what Dan Morgan's done. And even to speak about the offensive line, to be able to get Austin Corbett and Cade Mays to both come back, to get Brady Christensen back here, and to have all those guys on the roster. And I know there's been injuries to Austin, to Cade, and to Brady, who's out for the season, but still having the depth has allowed the Panthers to have 10 different starting combinations and to still be sitting here at 7-6 and not completely falling apart like they did a couple of seasons ago. And then you also look at Jake Kurhan, who was on the Cardinals practice squad. They identified him, they scouted him, and they brought him to Carolina, and he started on Sunday and had a solid day. So yeah, I think you should feel really confident in what Dan Morgan, what Brant Tillis, and what Dave Canales have built up into this point in year two. Like, we're not that far removed in Carolina from this being a 2-win football team, an absolute disaster, to where they were even last year, starting off 1-7 to now 7-6 and needing just maybe only 3 more wins, certainly 4 more in a row. And they're going to be a playoff team and division champs here in 2025. So a job well done. But the job, of course, is not finished this season or moving forward for this Panthers organization. And speaking of the playoffs, looking at the NFC South, just breaking down what the Panthers need to do. We'll do that here in just a moment on this weekly Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers. The holidays are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every time. It's not just something you wrap, it's a way to share memories, because Aura isn't your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before gifting it, so when they plug it in, the memories are already there. No apps to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. Aura is the perfect gift for grandparents, parents, newlyweds, anyone who loves photos. Get endless uploads of pictures and 30-second videos through the Aura app. It's a holiday gift that actually gets used and not forgotten in a drawer. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling carver matte frames, named #1 by Wirecutter by using promo code LOCKEDON at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code LOCKEDON. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. Let's get back into this weekly Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers. Now over to Trey, who says, long live the Bryce and Dave debates. Yes, Trey. Yes, long live them, but not this week. Not this time, Devil. I was 100% with you, Trey says, and everyone else about us not standing a chance, and can't believe the Panthers doubled Stafford's interception total, much less won the game. For the mailbag, how many wins do you think gets the Panthers into the playoffs? Now, I broke this down a little bit during the good, the bad, and the ugly yesterday on the show. Just the Panthers' path to the playoffs as far as the wild card, which it would seem to be very difficult. I don't think it's going to be a possibility at 10-7 for them to get there. Now, at 11-6, they're going to win the division. So I just don't really see the wild card being an option for Carolina. So the path to the playoffs is also the path that you always want, is by winning the division and hosting a home playoff game. So when you look at it, how many wins do they need? Well, 4. 4 assures you that you're in the playoffs, because 11-6, you would have swept the Bucks, which would be good enough for the head-to-head, and you also would have beat the Saints and the Seahawks. You'd be 11-6. You would have 5 straight wins, and you would be scalding hot. Like, if they win 4 straight games, this is going to be like, this town's going to be going insane if that happens. If they win 4 straight after winning against the Rams, and it would be a lot of people saying, oh, whoa, hold on. Maybe Carolina, the hottest team in the NFL. Maybe there's somebody to look out for. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. With 4 games, that's the simplest way for them to go out there and to make the playoffs. Another simple way is just to win your 3 remaining divisional round games, which would be beating the Saints out of the bye, beating Tampa the week after that. Then after that, Seattle, whatever, then go down and beat Tampa. You do that, you're 5-1 in division. You win the tiebreaker over Tampa Bay, which wouldn't even be a tiebreaker, I think, at that point in time. Even if they won and they were 10-7, if they won their other games and lost 2 to you, you're 10-7, they're 10-7. You win the tiebreaker because of head-to-head. So that would be the simplest way. Either win your last 4 games or win the remaining division games against Tampa and against New Orleans. Now, it gets tough from there as far as tiebreaker scenarios. If the Panthers are 10-7, already went over again yesterday the scenario as far as the wild card, but within the division, I don't see how at 10-7, if they don't win both games against Tampa. I mean, they could split. I guess if they won both, I just don't really see how, if they don't win both games against Tampa, how they don't end up making the playoffs as the division champ, and then even with the wild card. So if they split with Tampa and both those teams end up being 10-7, that would mean the Bucs would need to either lose to Atlanta or New Orleans. So they're both 4-2 in the division. Losing to Miami, the Bucs losing to Miami would not help Carolina. They would actually lose the common game tiebreaker. So it goes from head-to-head, which would be tied. Then it goes to division record, which would be tied. Then it would be common games, so common opponents. So obviously you're already 4-2 within the division. So those are common opponents. You look at it, both of them have beat the Jets. In this scenario, I have Carolina beating the Seahawks, so both would have a win against the Seahawks. Panthers lost to the Niners. The Bucs beat the Niners. Both lost to the Patriots. Panthers beat the Rams. The Bucs lost to the Rams. The Panthers lost to the Cardinals. The Bucs beat the Cardinals. And then in this scenario, even if they lose to the Dolphins, I have them both winning, because in this scenario they'd have to win against the Dolphins. The Bucs would, in order to be sitting there at 10-7. Carolina would lose the common opponent tiebreaker, and even if they were both 9-8, they also would end up losing that tiebreaker. Otherwise, the only other way for them to win the division would be, if they split with Tampa, would be for the Bucs to lose to Atlanta, New Orleans, and then Miami as well. Because they had to lose to, I think, both Atlanta or New Orleans and Miami. They had to lose two games against either of those 3 opponents, which I don't really see happening. So yeah, that would be Carolina finishing 10-7, Tampa finishing at 10-8. I just think, very simply, just either win out or win your remaining divisional games. Like, that's where it all begins every single year, is with the division games. If you can win those games, you're going to put yourself in a prime position to win the division, go to the playoffs. Obviously, there's 11 more games outside of those, but those, especially at this point in time of the season, we looked even at the beginning of the year, have a massive importance heading into it. So yeah, 4 wins or 3 wins, but they got to be the right 3 for Carolina to get into the playoffs here in 2025. Now over to Chip, who asks, as the Panthers head into the bye week, which players that don't get a lot of recognition have surprised you so far this season? Maybe you were critical of them at the beginning, but perhaps they have surprised you so far. The guy who I think comes to mind first would be Nick Scott. A lot of folks are not fans of Nick Scott. Totally understand that. He was the lowest graded safety in the NFL 2 years ago in Cincinnati. He got benched midway through the season, came in last year, was, at least we thought, going to be just a rotational backup kind of guy. Then Gerald Veros talked about how he and Jordan Fuller and Xavier Woods were all going to be starting safeties in his defense. And there was plenty of injuries at that safety spot, and he didn't play well. Then he was re-signed, and I was thinking, okay, he's just here to play special teams, right? He's not here to be a starter. And looking at training camp very early on, all right, he was out there all the time. but he was just a placeholder, right? Eventually it'd be Damani Richardson. Eventually it'd be Lathan Ransom, right? Right? No. Actually, EJ was like, I really like this guy, and I want him to be my starting safety. And Nick Scott, damn it, it's been the starting safety all season long. And he's gone from one of the lowest graded safeties in the NFL the past 2 seasons to a guy who's been pretty middle of the road this year, which is surprising because I just didn't have high expectations for him in that spot. And he's had a couple of plays this season where obviously he didn't make a tackle, and that was Travis Etienne running down the sideline there against the Jags week 1. And then there's been other busts as well, but then he has a fumble recovery against the Packers, which that was Roseboom knocking out, but he recovered it. He had the interception, which of course that was Derek Brown making the play. So he's finishing off some of these great defensive plays being made by his teammates. And that's part of a team game that football is. So I think that he has been someone who surprised me. As a 62.6 PFF grade, which is 54th out of 95 safeties this season in the NFL. He's been in the 90s and has been graded out in the 50s and the 40s the last 2 seasons. So that is improvement. So I definitely give him a lot of recognition. And you're asking about guys who don't get a lot of recognition. Obviously, Rico Dowdle does get a lot. That surprised me. One thing I will say, is Tetairoa McMillan. He's actually exceeded my expectations. I was going back and trying to find what my baseline expectations were for him as far as the numbers. And I had compared him throughout the offseason to the last 3 guys last year in the draft that were drafted in the top 10 at wide receiver. That was Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze. Marvin Harrison Jr. had 62 receptions, 885 yards, and 8 touchdowns last year in Arizona. Malik Neighbors was outstanding with the Giants. 109 receptions, 1,204 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Rome Odunze, 54 receptions, 734 yards, 3 touchdowns. Now, you look at Rome, he was the number 3 receiver in Chicago when they had Keenan Allen and, of course, our old friend DJ Moore. So I was not really expecting like the not expectation, but rather like the opportunity there for him was not the same as Malik Neighbors, who had to be the guy. And then even Marvin Harrison Jr. to a lesser extent. They had Trey McBride, who was their top receiver, but he was the top wide receiver on the team. Heading into the season, I was still under the assumption that Adam Thielen to be around, but there would be an opportunity, kind of like Harrison Jr.'s, for Tetairoa McMillan to have a big season. And so far, he's on track and to like blow past what I expected him to do. I felt like an appropriate expectation for him this year was 60 plus receptions, 850 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So far, he has 57 receptions, 826 yards, and 6 touchdowns with 4 games remaining. So at least reception wise, he's going to go past that 60 mark. And yards wise, he's going to go past that 850 yard mark. Touchdown wise, I don't know. I can't guarantee that he'll go past 6. I do think he's got a chance, obviously, but he's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. And I would think that he's probably going to get to 70 receptions this year. So if we're looking at like 70, 72 receptions, over 1,000 yards receiving, 8 touchdowns, maybe more, he's had a good year. So if there's somebody who's been at least recognized a lot who surprised me, it would be T-Mac. I thought he'd be good. I didn't think he was going to be this good and become, I think, who will very clearly be the best rookie receiver in franchise history after this year is over. All right, let's take another quick break, and I'll be back here and answer the rest of your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the games, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scorers, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast. and so can you. A few more questions on this weekly Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers. Now over to Joseph, who asked me, do you think Dave Canales will take a ride the hot hand, in quotes, with the offensive line group coming into these last 4 games? Will Cade Mays come back into the center position? Has any backup guys earned a chance to continue starting? With so many lineup changes, what is the ideal lineup moving forward? This is a good question, because there have been times this season where I felt like one guy was going to play and then someone else was actually out there starting. So looking at Cade Mays, he has very clearly, at least from all that we have seen and even been told by Dave Canales, he has solidified his spot as a starting center here in Carolina. Now, he's missed the last 2 weeks of an ankle injury, and he has the bye week this week. So I would guess he'll be back ready to go for New Orleans, and he will be the starting center. Now, he missed week 9 at Green Bay. Austin Corbett started that game. And in week 10, once he was back healthy, Cade was right back in there at the center spot against New Orleans. Now, you look at right guard. That's an area where Robert Hunt, we don't know whether he's going to be at practice next week. Dave Canales on Monday still said that they weren't there yet with Rob, but they'll have to wait and see how things play out. My guess is the guy tore his biceps. He's not going to play this season. Maybe he does, but that's something that's up in the air. But he's on IR right now. Chandler Zavala, he's on IR right now as well, which leads to either Austin Corbett or Jake Kurhan getting an opportunity to start at right guard like Kurhan did on Sunday as Corbett was filling in at center for Cade Mays. Now, this is where it's tricky for me. I thought back in week 11 that Corbett was going to start at right guard, even though Chandler Zavala, who had started there before his injury while Corbett's filling in for Mays, I thought that Corbett would get to start at right guard. Instead, Dave Canales went with Chandler Zavala. Now, Chandler Zavala ended up getting Bryce Young hurt in that game and really wasn't good. I didn't understand that decision. I know Chandler has obviously improved since his rookie year, where he shouldn't have not been on the field anyways. But that's what happens with all the injuries that they had and not having enough depth. But he's been better the last 2 seasons. I just didn't see why he would be in there over Austin Corbett. A big reason why Austin won the starting center job was his experience. Cade Mays couldn't compete against that. He has not been in the league long enough to have the experience that Austin Corbett has. Also, the vocal leadership that Austin has in that room. So why would Chandler Zavala be there at right guard? And they had said that they like the versatility where Austin can come in and play center. He can play guard. I just don't understand why, if he's already starting at right guard, and if Cade goes out, why he can't just move over and everything will be fine. But apparently that's something they wanted to do. Now, Jake Kurhan, who was solid, and Dave said there was some misassignments by him on Sunday not winning against the Rams, but he was overall not a liability. And he's had some bright moments like in against Green Bay when he had to fill in when Zavala went down in that game. Why then? Well, I don't know what's going to happen with that. Like, it could be Kurhan, it could be Corbett, it could be Rob Hunt if he comes back off of IR. Your guess is as good as mine, I suppose, Joseph. I would think that the best situation for the offensive line is Icky at left tackle, Damian Lewis at left guard. Like, those guys are going to be in their starting spots. Cade Mays at center, Austin Corbett at right guard, and Taylor Moton at right tackle. Go with experience. Go with the guy in Corbett who's played so many more snaps than Kurhan has so far this season. Go with those guys, because I think that's your best 5 at this point in time, over trying to get a little cute here and put in a guy with less experience just so you can have somebody who has more versatility as a backup in Corbett. So that's what I think they should do. We'll find out what they end up doing and who's available after the bye week here next week. Final question coming from Brian, who says, reflecting on the season so far, how crazy is it to think how differently this season could have went if the Panthers didn't convert that 4th down and 4, down 17-0 against the Dolphins in week 5. It's also been a play that has defined what this team is apparently good at going forward on 4th down. Yeah, they definitely are. We talked about that yesterday when going over the good, the bad, and the ugly. The Panthers, 70% conversion rate. They've attempted the most 4th downs in the league so far, 21 out of 30. They've been really good. And, of course, 3 for 3 on Sunday, including the 4th and 3 touchdown to Jalen Coker, the 4th and 2 touchdown to T-Mac. awesome to see them be aggressive in those situations. But yeah, it was actually a 4th and 5 that they were facing, and they were at Miami's 48. So yeah, it's go for it territory when you're already down 17-0. It had been back-to-back drives where the Dolphins had scored a touchdown because of Bryce Young's fumble and interception. They kicked the field goal on their opening drive. So their first 3 drives that Miami had, they scored 17 points. Carolina could not afford to not get that first down. Of course, they pick it up. Bryce finds T-Mac down the field for 21 yards. Eventually, he finds Xavier Legette for that touchdown. Dave Canales is tearing up on the sideline. It's like, here we go, Panthers. They're still in it. Had that not happened, I think things snowball. The turnovers that Bryce had on the second and third drives of that game, the Dolphins started with the ball on their own 42 and on Carolina's 49. They would have had the ball on their own 48. So at midfield, basically, they would have probably scored a touchdown. Because we have seen, especially earlier in the year, things would snowball when things got bad for this team. And they've been resilient, as you mentioned, Brian, because that has really defined what they've been able to do, not just converting on 4th downs, but being resilient throughout the season, bouncing back. If they don't get it there, I think Miami scores a touchdown. It's 24-0. There's boo birds. There's more tweets about Bryce has got to go. And it's a team that ends up starting 1-4. And certainly, obviously, not going to be 7-6 right now. I think things could have gotten real sideways. This could have been an ugly year, but also you look at just the way this team has responded throughout the year, maybe they would have been fine, but they wouldn't be in the spot they're in right now, of course. So yeah, that was huge to get that win that day, but more importantly, to be able to get, well, not more important, but certainly was a part of that win and led to it was that play that Bryce made by finding T-Mac there on that 4th down and 5. So yeah, I shudder to think about what this season could have been had they not gotten that and had Miami gone down and scored yet again. It would not have been fun, but it has been fun so far as Carolina sitting here heading their bye. They are 7-6 and right there in the thick of the playoff race here in the NFC. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Hosted by yours, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, where I'll be back with y'all next Wednesday answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is at me or DM me over on Twitter to get those questions into me really right now. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I'll be back with y'all on Thursday as we'll take a look at the Panthers offense through the first 14 weeks of the season and give up some grades and how things they have and how well they've done and just say how well they've done so far this year. All right. Talk to you tomorrow.